I'd be crazy not to point something out here because I hope the audience didn't miss this here, because it's the same way I find in business. So for me, the times that I'm curious, the times that I'm in the dojo, I'm doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and the times that, because I'm a scuba diver, obviously living in Okinawa, like I was diving, I mean, literally like 4 or 5 times a week for a solid year, like all the time. And fun
We
fact,
got a lot in common. This is
oh,
crazy.
I know, right? Exactly. But I find, and I'm gonna circle back here, and I promise this is gonna be very relevant. But the times for me when I am the most in love with life and I'm curious have been when I've made the most progress in what I'm trying to do. Most of the time, the progress that I make is something not even related to it, if that makes any sense. Meaning, I'm winning in life, but I'm kind of in a rut in my business or in my growth. And when I'm loving life, it just seems to flow and naturally go. I mean, you don't, go to the UK, meet a Japanese woman, go on vacation and get married in 3 months, kind of elope the way I did without, really focusing on the flow of life, kind of what you had mentioned there. But I just don't want to skip over that and pretend like that's casual, because you're talking about diving and like growing up doing karate, and you're a pilot at age 14, and like there's such a genuine curiosity. And I have been told by mentors of mine in business several times, they've never met an interesting person that doesn't, excuse me, yes, they've never met an interesting person that doesn't do interesting things outside of like their career, outside of their business, right? It's not necessarily balance per se, like Musashi, from the Five Rings, but I think there's this weird untold law about when you're in love with life of what you're doing, things, as I said, completely unrelated. You're like loving getting into the dojo. You're loving, flying for the first time. And it's like, oh, wow, my sales magically increased. And it's like, I think there's something there. And again, that's, I don't have data behind that, but I'm like, man, from my experience, the one of the most successful business owners I've ever been privileged to be around, billionaire kind of guy, loves cars, like fanatical about cars, loves travel, incredible. He will eat his food before you've taken your third bite. He'll be done. And he's like, and I even brought it up. I was like, you just killed your breakfast. And he's like, I don't care. I've always been this way. I love my food. I'm going to enjoy my food. And I'm not going to allow, like this posh, mentality of I got to wait around. It's like, that's my love. And there's this little kid tendency that I find in people that are good at what they do and ultimately like actually progress, in what they're doing. And this is what I'm hearing from you. Now, I can't just move on without asking, why were you a pilot at age 14?
Well, I did want to make one point, and it's like if you're not aware of the energy that exists on this planet, like you're not paying attention. And I really do. I mean that. Like I feel like for so many people, like if you're not paying attention to the energy and where that pull is coming from, like, then you're not paying attention. I think that that is the best thing that we can do in life is to really just be aware that, sometimes like just being open to your own path, it'll carve itself out for you, but you have to be open to it. And I think that's one thing that I wanted to say. So back to pilots. I mean, again, growing up in the dojo, so many different types of people that my dad attracted. And I think that's a really special thing that you probably know of the dojo is it attracts so many different people from so many different walks of life. I mean, Quentin, we had like people that were priests, we had people that were U.S. Marshals, we had people that were prison guards, teachers, what have you. Like it was like, just this really cool, wonderful, family, right, that came together. And some of them I really do. I call them uncles. Like I call, Art Daniels, Uncle Art. I call, John Musser or Uncle John. It's like if these people knew I was in trouble, I could call them up and they would, be there for me. There's that camaraderie and that bond that's created through karate. Well, I had another Uncle John. I had two Uncle Johns. One, John Olinger, who was a flight instructor. And so my dad growing up, basically just kind of said, like, son, would you be interested in this? Because, he can basically teach you to fly for free. We'll rent the plane and, maybe you'll have like another skill set. Because again, I think he saw how much I loved acting, but he always wanted me to have balance outside of it. And so, I always say this, but I mean, like, becoming a pilot, I soloed at 14. I got my license at 16. It's the hardest college course I've ever taken because it's mathematics, it's practicality, it's communications. It's fascinating. And there really is. I mean, there's that time that I reflect on all the time, which is, the first time that I soloed, right? I got my license like right at 16 years old. And the first time that I took off by myself, I mean, it is exhilarating. You are fearful but like excited at the same time, and then you have that lift, and again, you're just circling around the airport and coming back down. But the way that John did it was almost like, he would say to a nephew. One day I was just literally, we were taxiing, to the runway, and he literally looks at me and he looked and he just said this. He was like, all right, 3 takeoffs, 3 landings, and he got out of the plane. And so, yeah, right. So it's just kind of like one of those things. Like, it's like, that's the relationships that I had. And so I feel like, that's what we should all aspire to do growing up is, and really in our lives is like, learn from people that like do things that are different from you. If he hadn't been in my life, I wouldn't have been a pilot. And because I caught the bug, I mean, it was another crossroads. I always talk about like crossroads in my life because again, sometimes like you have to choose one way or the other. I really loved flying. Like I could have seen myself being a pilot and, maybe eventually like, I'll have the time and the money because it's expensive to get back into it. But, I got my commercial license shortly thereafter at 18 years old. So I could fly for hire. And then I was basically really close to getting my multi-engine license as well. And it's because of all these relationships that I had developed in Virginia, people that would give me, these planes for way cheaper than, they would have been worth. Again, so much of going to New York City was the reason why I couldn't fly anymore, because a Cessna 152 or 172 that was $75 to $85 an hour was now $350 an hour. The instructors that I was basically getting for free, or the airtime. I mean, there was one guy that I knew that had an Aztec, which is a multi-engine plane, and he let me fly it for free as long as I would go to Maryland and gas up for him. So it was like I was getting like flight time in this really nice plane just for flying it around. So again, like take advantage of life, right? Take advantage of life. Growing up, I never thought like, let me learn how to fly a plane before I could drive a car. And yes, my dad had to drive me to the airport so that I could fly around. I mean, it's like the weirdest thing ever. Like I did not have my driver's license, but like I could fly a plane around. And again, like, this is such a great conversation because it's like, for anybody listening, like take advantage of those opportunities. Like they're fleeting. And sometimes you just, it's like that classic thing of like the regrets in life are when you said no to something. Like it's very rare that you regret something where you said yes, where like it could be an adventure, it could be an opportunity, and it could be something that teaches you something. Because it was so different from what I was doing in acting that like the technical aspects of flying, I was like, wow, this is really cool because, it's exciting. And this was really something that I always reflect fondly is that my dad and I actually took a trip and I got to fly him out to a dojo in Michigan. And we took a 4-hour flight. And at one point, Quinton, we're over Canadian airspace and I'm looking down at Windsor and I'm over Lansing. And then I'm basically actually over, water. Cause I mean, that path basically goes over water for a good hour, and so like, it's scary the first time that you're over water, there's no land underneath you. So it was just one of those things where, getting to fly my dad and, what would normally be like a 10-12 hour trip through the mountains, like we're just flying direct and, just flying directly to Lansing airport and then flying home a couple days later. I mean, those are special times that I reflect on. And again, like, say yes, because then you never know where that path's going to take you. But if you're open to it, like we went back to, it's like, be open to that energy. Like, there's something mystical about this planet. There's something mystical about this life. I believe in that. Just be open to where the path will take you, and you'll find your way.
Well, man, I want to say thank you here because, me and my wife have been working on coming to the States, and it took about 4 years or so. Did everything legally, all that jazz you could imagine. The visa process is just as much fun as you can imagine it is, and is just probably more paperwork than you can even imagine. But when we got here in mid-December, which was a huge blessing because it was like the first holiday season in almost a decade, maybe longer than that all of the family could be together. And for the first time, my wife could be here, and then even my firstborn son could be here, which has been amazing. But I want to thank you because I haven't plugged in because I've been so focused on getting back to work and getting reestablished, and I've had to even hold off on some interviews and just, all right, now what? What's the plan? When you move, to the other side of the planet, like, things shift. But I haven't had that love or the curiosity. So it probably wouldn't surprise you as I describe this that I haven't gotten back into the dojo yet. And I've kind of felt like it's not real. It is just my imagination. But I've kind of felt like I've been in this little bit of a rut, or this a little bit of like, I'm trying to build this thing for several months now, separate from the podcast and the interviews, just work wise. But I'm not getting, and I'm like wondering, why does it feel like I'm running through mud? Well, you just gave me my answer here. It's that curiosity for life, exactly what I just described. The people that have those hobbies, the people that are doing those things from genuine curiosity are the ones that, in a totally unrelated way, seem to make progress in other facets as well. And I think you just gave me a big clue or insight about what this is. I feel like I've worked for so long and so hard and waited so long to actually get here that now that I'm here, it's like, all right, work, instead of like, where's that childhood curiosity yet again, and the joy of being back in the hometown for the first time in 15 years or whatever, how long, just whatever. But I want to thank you for that because I had that little light bulb there. What's going on, guys? If you like that clip right there, you will love the full interview. You can check that out right there. I'll see you on the next video. Oh, and subscribe because we got a lot of big things coming up in the near future.